Yeah. I think because that's the way David Horowitz put it. I had David Horowitz on a couple of weeks back, and he says conservatives are realists. So we have no problem being pessimistic. We're not utopianists or anything like that. I thought that was pretty good.
No, that's good insight. Okay, we got Steve Turley here. Charles Moscowitz, thanks for joining me, everyone. Steve is the host of Turley Talks. He is one of the preeminent intellectuals right now on the world scene with regard to what you describe as the nationalist, populist, traditionalist movement and how things are going. Now, Steve, first of all, thanks for joining me as always.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Charles. Love being on your show.
You know, I look to your YouTube show every single day. When I go out for my vigorous walk in these pandemic times, I put my earphones on and I listen to you first.
Oh,
and,
nice.
It's very bracing in terms of putting things in a good context of what's going on and things that we can feel positive about. Not that you look at life through rose-colored glasses by any means,
right.
but we need to take stock of where we are in these times and where we're going. And, I think you do a very good job of it. Firstly, the news today, I feel discouraged over what the news emanating out of the Supreme Court. What the hell has happened to Amy Coney Barrett?
We will have to see. This is Antonin Scalia's, protege. We're going to have to see what's going on. I have no idea. Dick Morris has an interesting take on it. He thinks the court is intimidated by the Democrats' threat to pack it.
Yes.
I don't know if I buy that per se. So in other words, they're just trying to stay silent and not make any waves, stay out of the news. I don't know about that. We'll have to see. Oh, just the latest with Mike Kelly's case and the Act 77 violation that basically the Pennsylvania Supreme Court engaged in, which was a blatantly unconstitutional legislating from the bench. They filed that case. What was it? September, October, before the election.
Right.
And they were told by Sam Alito that unfortunately we're not going to have this. The court's not going to have the time to be able to deliberate over this before November 3rd. So you could read it. It's online. Sam Alito, it's about a 4-page response to Mike Kelly's case, saying that alleging that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court had violated the Constitution, the federal Constitution, in basically interfering in the election in terms of determining the time, place, and manner of election, which alone belongs to the Pennsylvania legislature. And Alito said, yeah, it looks like they certainly did that. So we're going to have to visit this after the election. So it's like we, the citizens, are doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing. And then just the elites say, no, never mind. So yeah, that's what you're upset with, in case you're just listeners to know. Then we get the Supreme Court coming out and say, oh, never mind, a 6-3 and 6-3 decision. Never mind. We're not even going to take a look at it, this case, because now it's a moot point because Trump won. Well, Trump lost. It's not a question of it being a moot point for 2022 or 2024. Right.
And it's also a basic constitutional question. They're not supposed to look at that. Article 2, Section 3 says that the state legislators shall regulate elections. It's pretty black and white. And I think that who knows what the thinking is other than obvious sheer politics. If they came in with a judgment that supported the Pennsylvania legislature and thus moving forward supports all state legislators in their reassumption of their constitutional prerogative to make election law. In the immediate sense, that could affect the outcome of the Pennsylvania election, and that could perhaps bring into question the election itself. We have to be careful here. This is YouTube. Let's watch what we say in these somewhat oppressive times. This is like a third world banana republic. You can't criticize an election anymore. The government, the people that have assumed power, you can't look back and say anything. So I want to use somewhat euphemistic language here.
Why don't we'll call it Russiagate?
Oh, okay. Yeah,
That'll
right.
be our code. That'll be our code word for it. We could talk about it all day.
Oh, yeah. And of course, now we'd be called conspiracy theorists. I just got into this. When the biggest conspiracy theory hatched in the past 5 years was that Donald Trump was spying for Russia. Talk about nutcase. And also that Donald Trump sent in the guy in the buffalo suit to interrupt Congress because he wants to stop the count and overthrow the government. Right? I mean, these talk about conspiracy theories.
It's exactly. It's a great point. And look, I got to tell you, Charles, I interviewed Daniel Miller a few weeks back. Right. Daniel Miller is the president of the Texas Nationalist Association. Is it? He's been doing that now for almost 3 decades, and this is what fuels Texas. It's precisely what the Supreme Court did. When I talk to, our members of our Insiders Club and all that sort of stuff, when they see Washington, D.C. and the swamp look totally irredeemable, when we work so hard to get Kavanaugh on that Supreme Court, we defend him, we stand by him, and then he gets up there and he's, Anthony Kennedy Part 2. We just throw up our hands and that's when I hear people say, we've had it, Tex it all the way, let's go, it's irredeemable. So this is, I think all this is doing in the end is it's just exacerbating the gap that exists between the people and the political class. And you don't want to exacerbate that anymore, because my heavens, if you do, that's when people start splitting away from the political class big time. Again, we're seeing it all over the world.
That's right.
Yeah, we're seeing it here as well.
And so we have essentially the political class reasserting and reassuming the positions literally of power, not that they didn't ever leave the high ground of culture. And they seem to be consolidating things right now. We have the hearings with Merrick Garland, where he's talking about persecuting people because of systemic racism. I thought we have enough laws in this country already to address, discrimination, and should have them. I'm not against that, but he doesn't define what he means by that. And that's opening the door to all kinds of greater government interference in people's lives. And nothing much is said about that. We've got an assistant secretary of Health and Human Services. We have to be careful on this topic, not to go too deep, but giving a green light to giving various drugs to minors so that they can claim to be something other than who they are. Again, let's use euphemisms here. This is YouTube. We're going to get banned. And so I only bring these 2 points up to illustrate the point that the ruling class, the establishment, what President Trump accurately called the deep state, they are beginning to take their positions in power again, and they're beginning to exercise that power in a way that reflects their own rather hybrid and quirky worldview that is contrary to not only average Americans, but common sense. So my question to you, Dr. Steve Turley, is should we view this as the last gasps of a ruling elite who are just clinging to power and who are taking draconian steps, or are they really going to be able to reassert this kind of power and really snuff out opposition?
Yeah, well, I think it's probably in the middle there. So I do think this is a last gasp, but that's the scholarship that's out there right now on the near implosion of globalism is really pretty impressive. And this is a scholarship that fully recognizes that they can have a few more cycles of electoral successes and the like, no question. But it feels like we're in the 1970s in the Soviet Union, and people are just starting to openly talk, maybe there's another way of doing things here behind the Iron Curtain. They're saying this. And of course, it didn't take long for things to fall. I like the example of the Czechoslovakian dissidents Václav Havel and Václav Benda. So Václav Havel actually went on to be president of the Czech Republic, or prime minister, I forget which one. And they were arguing for something called a parallel polis back in the 1970s during the Soviet era in Czechoslovakia. And the argument of a parallel polis was that in the midst of a civilization where the basic structures are completely irredeemable and are corrupt to the core, it's incumbent upon the citizens who want to live in truth to create their own parallel structures, to create their own, in effect, parallel society where they can live in truth. Now, this is the way that we're talking in the Soviet Union. And as you know, Charles, this is the way people are talking today. This is what alt tech is all about. This is what the alternative media is all about. This is what talk radio was all about in many respects. So this is what, they're even talking about, creating our own servers, creating our own banks. Ben Shapiro was just talking about that the other day. Ben's currently involved in creating his own productions company with Gina Carano and so on. So whenever it seems to me, at least historically, you're hearing significant talk about, you know what, we're going to live out truth in parallel structures. We're going to create our own networks, and we're going to pretend like this corrupt nonsense is not even there. Within 10 years, the whole thing fell apart. The corrupt nonsense, that is, it fell apart. So I think we're seeing similar processes going on here where we know what the future is. The future is conservatism, it's nationalism, it's populism. I mean, this is what Ronald Reagan embraced. I mean, he said the Soviet Union is not going to get in the way of this. And if I can paraphrase him, AOC ain't going to get in the way of this. It is at the very heart of what it means.
It's natural.
Yeah, so
it's because it's normal. It's natural.
It's normal. It's a natural order of things, of nation and culture and custom and tradition and the like. And that's how people are liberated, and that's how people end up experiencing the most flourishing life and family and faith and community and freedom. So I think in the end, we're in a civilizational crisis. It's really scary. In other words, this is not just a financial crisis we're in, or just a structural crisis or anything like that. No, we're really in a civilizational crisis. We're at the end of a, liberal, globalist, modernist experiment that basically has 3 centuries of history to it. And we're moving more into a postmodern, localist, nationalist, populist outworking of life. But in the meantime, they're going to do everything they can to, just like they did in the Soviet Union, to prolong their rule. Remember that the Soviet Union didn't fall until 2 years after the Berlin Wall. This is stuff that takes time. And so I think they're going to be incredibly nasty. I mean, I think we could already see that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
They're going to be so the cancel culture knows no end. Cancel culture knows no end. And ultimately, Charles, we know they want to cancel Western civilization. In the end, that's the ultimate canceling. That's what all the Frankfurt School, the Herbert Marcuse and all those guys in the 1960s, that's the ones who push this cultural Marxism. That's what they were pushing for. And so all these miniature cancelings that we're getting are all just for that ultimate canceling. So they're going to be really, really nasty, and it's going to be pretty, pretty horrid. But I think the winds are on our backs, and we can keep going, and they're going to do everything they can. But in the end, I don't think they can stop this new age of conservatism and traditionalism and so forth any more than the Soviet Union could or Nazi fascism could. I think any modernist experiment that stands in the way of it is going to ultimately collapse because its roots aren't there anymore.
Right. I mean, I agree. Although the price that we pay in the process of their attempt to control people, that could be horrendous. It could be war. It could be holocausts.
Yeah. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
of it. I mean, this is like as you mentioned, the National Socialist experiment.
Yeah.
And these are things that are unnatural impositions by this elite, left-leaning, in that case, radical left establishment. And what you're describing, Steve, kind of reminds me a little bit of Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand's novel, right? I don't know if you read it, but I read it years ago. I'm not a big, Ayn Randian now, but I went through a phase with that probably 20 years ago. And she talks about people dropping out and creating an alternative culture in the mountains of Colorado, this Atlantis, and that good people, conscious people, productive people started to disappear one after another until there was no one left, and the whole thing imploded. And I don't know if we can look at a dystopian situation in a literal sense, but sometimes something that has a science fiction element can have a lot of truth to it. And what you're describing is that we're creating alternative venues. We're creating, I mean, you've done a good job of showing, for example, on big tech, how we can post our videos on Rumble and on Minds, something that I do now routinely. And there's Gab. I've heard the CEO of Gab being interviewed, and he's talking about millions of people signing up. They had their bank account taken away. You can't get it anymore. You have to send them an old-fashioned check to get on Gab. But it's huge. And I think that you see this gradually happening, as you say, and it's the kind of thing that, Coca-Cola now, people are going to start to boycott it because of a recent comment they made that what is it, that we're not white enough, or that we're too white, or some racist comment. Suddenly people, the woke crowd, suddenly people are like, okay, fine, to heck with Coke. I'm not suggesting we do that, by the way, but I'm just simply pointing out that we are becoming more conscious of, I guess in a way, it kind of also reminds me of the late, great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in which in his last speech before he was murdered, he tried to point out to the Black community that they have a greater economic footprint than most third world countries, and that it's not, they can patronize businesses that support what they believe in and not patronize those that don't. And that this was, he saw, a peaceful way, a nonviolent way of bringing about racial justice in the real meaning of the term, not in a phony left-wing.
Sure.
And so maybe that's what's going on. In a way, we're involved in today's civil rights movement, a reassertion of individual rights, of faith, of the American political philosophy that rights come from God and not from the state.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Scholars are talking about consumer politics a lot, and that they're huge now. Consumer politics, it was just a marginal issue, say 30 years ago, and now it's almost become central. You have to actually, in many respects, any kind of business model is going to have to take consumer politics as part of its, to take it into consideration as part of its business model. Consumer politics, bottom line, is the increasingly plausible notion for more and more people that they can vote with their wallets, and they can pursue and indeed promote their political values, their cultural values through the various different patronizing activities they have with businesses. And that involves boycotts and boycotts. Boycotts, obviously, is we're not going to patronize a business that like you mentioned with Coca-Cola. For some people, they're not going to want to buy it anymore because they hear they've gone all woke Coke. I guess we can put that together. And then it has boycotts. Okay, well then that's a great opportunity for Pepsi to come out and say, well, you know what, we're going to come out with a special Patriot Pop or something like that to celebrate our values, and people were galvanized by that. Obviously Chick-fil-A was at the center of the culture wars.
Yeah, they had a huge impact, and same thing with Mike Lindell.
Mike Lindell, gigantic.
Right? One of your
again, did you see Alan Dershowitz is going to represent him against Dominion?
Oh, excellent.
And
by the way, not to get in, we have to be careful on that subject.
I know.
I would simply note that a very well-known attorney, a female attorney, we know who I'm talking about, has said to them, bring it on, because now we can get discovery.
Yes.
This thing in the courtroom, so now we can finally get to the truth. We don't want to talk about that, because then people, that's a no-no.
That's a no-no, exactly.
Until the day then the courtroom opens up, and then we'll be able to talk about it big time.
That's right. There you go.
Steve, what I want to get into a little, talk about the horse race, the upcoming midterm. We see Republicans being demonized who tried to stand up for a legitimate airing of voter irregularities, and the whole thing got shut down by the guy in the buffalo suit. We see Republicans like Mitch McConnell becoming further to the left. He's totally sold out conservative values because he's in. He has a 6-year term. He's not going to be primaried. People like Susan Collins, these people are, they can do whatever the heck they want, and they're showing their true colors now. I'm concerned about the possible split in the Republican Party. We've got President Trump speaking at CPAC this weekend, I think. That's going to be an interesting development there. There's talk about President Trump starting an alternative, social network. I understand that Don Jr. has been in conversation with Elon Musk about this. There are some interesting developments, but they're developments that could render the Republican Party into a split. And do you think that's happening? And if it's happening, how might that affect the midterm coming up in a matter of months?
Yeah, you're right. I know, literally months. Yeah, we're always campaigning here, aren't we?
Sure.
So, yeah. Okay. So you have to see it at a couple of different levels. So at one level, just the party itself. And the party itself, of course, is going through a major rupture with the two major factions of the party. One faction is the grassroots party. They're the MAGA party, part of the party. They're the deplorables, and they make up, good 75, 80, 85% of the party. And then the other side is the establishment Rhino Republican name only, and they make up the leadership. So they balance each other out in a sense. And there is a clash going on. And up to this point, as I understand, Mitch McConnell supports any candidate that's got the cash. So as I understand it, Mitch McConnell is a dollars-based strategist. If you've got the money, this is why you pick Loeffler over other candidates in Georgia, because she has money. If you've got money, I'm behind you, because we'll be able to overwhelm our opponents by outspending them. And a lot of pundits are saying that doesn't work anymore. Obviously, Trump proved that in 2016, when he got outspent 2-1. That doesn't work anymore. What works now is movements and excitement. And that's what we're seeing on the left with like a BLM or Antifa or something akin to that. And what we're seeing on the right with MAGA and the deplorables is just the excitement of being part of a movement is what gets people to the polls. So with that, I do think all the energy is behind Trump right now. Even Romney just admitted that the other day. All the energy is behind Trump. He came out of the second impeachment, this ridiculous charade. He came out of that stronger than ever. We saw a 14-point jump in a matter of just a couple of weeks between asking the very same question. Do you think, the party should be like Trump or should it move away? 14-point jump in favor of the party ought to be like Trump. It went from 40% to 54%. That's some pretty overwhelming support there. So he knows it. He knows nationalist populism is the wave of the future. That's what, he's a visionary. They're talking to Elon Musk. Elon Musk has gotten red-pilled of late. My, oh my, has he gotten red-pilled?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Now Mr. Texas and all that good stuff. So, absolutely, I think that is great, but it's going to clash with the establishment. So this is what made Reagan brilliant. Reagan was able to balance out the sort of the increasingly populist grassroots with the Ford Bushite leadership establishment, he was able to calm them. He was originally seen as just a Barry Goldwater lunatic at first,
right, sure.
and then George Bush Sr. helped to placate that when he chose him as his running mate, and he was able to balance it out. Apparently, from the research I've read, this is kind of the genius of Putin and how he's been able to stay in power for so long, as you have a very populist Russian population and a very globalist Russian oligarchy in power. And he's been able to find a way of balancing out that too. Then Bush Sr. comes into power, and he goes totally, rhino establishment. And so the populists, well, many of the populists went with Ross Perot in 92, so the populist grassroots. And then George W. Bush did the same thing. He went full neocon. And then in 2016, Mr. MAGA himself comes in, Trump, and he freaks out the establishment by going fully populist, Twitter and all, and couldn't stand. So the question is, if we don't find someone who can balance that out like Reagan can, the deplorables grassroots versus the neocon establishment, somebody who can ride the two like two wings of a plane, we risk we may have some issues there. So that's one level, and then the other level is just the natural organic movement of a midterm for the party that's outside of White House power to pick up seats if they are subpar, if they're under 50% in approval, which Biden will be. I mean, he's barely above 50 and Rasmussen. Then we tend to pick up 40, upwards of 30 to 40 seats. It's going to be a bloodbath. So it'll be very organic in that sense, and that might be able to make up for any kind of problems that we have. At least I think whoever's not happy with the result of the primaries, that gets made up by a lot of independent voters who just naturally go to the opposition party in the midterm. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to take away from the possibility of party fracturing. But I don't think it's going to be as bad as it, because in the end, the establishment rhinos know they need the deplorables in order to stay into power. They know that, so they're going to have to work that out in some way. I mean, even Pence and Trump seem to have reconciled a bit in their meeting a couple of days back. So anyway, it's a complex situation. We'll know more as it plays itself out. I am really looking forward to the CPAC speech, I have to say.
I know, that's interesting. And I think that, as you say, just by the facts on the ground, if you look at the history of this, the Republicans are going to take back the House in 2 years, and Pelosi will be gone, and we'll be at least moving if there can be some reasonable coalition of all sides in the party to do that. And we'll see. I mean, now the Texas situation, the blackouts, the grid collapse. I mean, I see this as similar to Katrina, and but Biden is not going to be held to that standard. And yet I think there's evidence. I talked to an expert the other day. This guy's a former Trump official in the Treasury Department, who said that Biden put a cap on the amount of energy any state can use over a certain amount, and did not allow for that to be mitigated in this emergency. And so the state could not. Plus, the state, we find out, has over 10% of its energy from wind and solar. It's probably more alternative energy than my own state of Massachusetts. So I think that this is the kind of thing that we need to have a vigorous investigation over, to find out what policies might have led to the suffering that's gone on in that state. Steve, I just want to wrap up by asking you, because you're in touch with the international scene. You're in touch with what's going on in France. You're in touch with Brexit. You're looking at Italy with their separatist movement, Hungary with Orban. Where do we stand in terms of the growth of the idea of the progressive idea of the nation state and of the assertion of nationalism around the world? I mean, China, we could look at Hong Kong, etc.
Yeah, it's still more powerful than ever in many respects. Again, they're bracing in Europe right now, particularly in Hungary. They're bracing for a big Brussels blowback, a globalist blowback like we got here. That's the way they're reading what's going on in the States. They see an Empire Strikes Back kind of structure going on there, a drama playing out. And they're a little worried about that happening in the nationalist populist governments in Hungary and Poland. But as we speak, for example, Italy is they're going through what's called a technocratic government, and that's specific to Italy, where if the parties can't get along, they actually bring in non-party actors. They tend to be bankers, they tend to be EU bureaucrats, and they're temporary custodians until things can get worked out. And that's the kind of government they have right now. And it looks like the nationalist populist right, if they were to have next time they have snap elections, they're going to win overwhelmingly. They're growing by leaps and bounds. And you're seeing it as well as in France. Macron just continues to struggle, even though he's moved solidly to the right, particularly in areas of the problem of Islamic communities that have never integrated into French society and values. And he's really cracked down on them. But it doesn't seem to be enough to sway the surge in the polls with Marine Le Pen of National Rally. So there was some fascinating movement going on. Portugal just got their first nationalist populist party. Portugal, for a long time, was one of the only nations in Europe, next to like Iceland, or that didn't have a nationalist populist party. Now they've got one that just won in their elections around 10 to 12% of the popular vote, and that's exactly what we saw with, for example, the rise of Lega in Italy, or the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, and in Germany, or the Swedish Democrats. And so you see them start around a 10% mark, and then that's all they need to enter in. And before you know it, they're starting to get into the 17, 20, 25%. These, of course, are multiple parties. So that's a huge number in these parliaments, representational parliaments. So we're seeing India, of course, the Narendra Modi government, very, very popular, and Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil. So it's pretty impressive stuff. The nationalist populist drumbeat keeps going. It's still very strong. May take a little bit of a setback here and there, like all movements do. As far as the left was concerned, many people thought they were dead after Jimmy Carter. Ha ha, right? You just got to keep plugging away and trust that the wind's at your back. And it looks like we're doing pretty well.
In a way, we have to be counter Fabians.
Yeah, there you go. I like that. That's
right. Steve, so let my audience know where they can listen to your excellent program and any websites you'd like to share.
Oh, thanks, Charles. They can go to my website, turleytalks.com. It's my last name, Turley, talks, like tedtalks.com, or just punch in my name, Dr. Steve Turley, on YouTube or Rumble or Parler. Welcome back, Parler, right? And Minds and Gab and BitChute. So we're on all the alt texts as well. And also you could go to our website and check out if you like podcasts. We have a place you can find all our different podcasts.
All right. Excellent. Listen, Steve, I want to thank you for joining me as always, and let's do it again soon.
Absolutely, Charles. Keep up